Hello and welcome to Lens of Hopefulness with me, your host, John Passadino. In this episode, I interviewed Damien Terrence Dubose, author of the book America's Ethical Archetypes, Establishing Psychology of Moral Authority and Correcting Our Country's Broken Politics. It's not the type of interview you would expect. We're not talking about specific personalities in this one. We're not debating who's right and who's wrong. We're talking specifically about psychology and philosophy of leadership. I think you'll enjoy this refreshing conversation with a very fascinating guest. Thanks for joining, and please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.
Analyzing life.
Considering the answers.
Lens of Hopefulness with John Passadino.
With guest
Author Damien Terrence Dubose.
Welcome, Damien. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, John. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I read your book, and it was an eye opener.
Thank you.
What I kept saying to myself, and I'm not just saying this to butter you up, but I said, this man has a beautiful mind.
Thank you.
The book is so intense and covers so many different topics related to psychology and philosophy that at times I said, this is a little too intense for me. I got to study first. That's why I postponed the interview. I was like, I got to read up on these people first so I could understand. I mean, you did a good job explaining, but I just like to have that background first.
That's good. I like that.
So,
nice.
The gist of it is that our country has evolved to the point it's at where it's divided, and it appears that the public is in a continual state of dysfunction and upset, and the government seems to be also. And you have theories on how that can be fixed.
True.
And
I do.
And it's not what people ordinarily might think. It's not, well, we need to impose more tariffs. And I'm not making fun of Trump, and I'm just saying that as an example. We need more tariffs. We need better unions. It's not that. It's actually almost like I'm just looking at it as proposing a whole new approach to leadership. One that we haven't seen in a long time, that blends, like I said, psychology, philosophy. And one of the names, let's start with, that you use is Ayn Rand.
Correct.
Who I didn't know that well before I read your book, but I know her now.
Okay.
So she's an objectionist, would you call it?
Objective. Well, she kind of like originated or founded Objectivism.
Objectivism.
Yes.
And Objectivism focuses on the freedom of the individual, correct? Would you say?
Correct. I mean, it's based around that. It's based around that view of life. It's I guess what you would call a egotist philosophy. Egotism is the ethical philosophy. So it's just really based around that.
Egotism, not in a definition of a person with a big ego.
Egoism. I'm sorry. Egoism. I think it's
egoism.
Yeah.
Egoism.
Right. I misspoke.
Okay. And by that you mean what?
So for what she meant, and I don't necessarily try to say exactly what she meant in the book, but I'll try to put it in my own words. But what I would say is that from what I put in the book and what I try to identify is that a person's individuality or individual character is what we should be focusing on. And that is kind of a ego personality perspective. And Jung talks about that, but it's just more about essentially looking at a person and their judgment. And the thing that makes them different from other people, makes them an individual. Centering a view of life around that.
And that's the Ayn Rand side. But let's give more a practical view of what that might look like. if somebody
Okay.
approached life from that perspective? Would you say perhaps that that person, I'm trying to think of words that people would identify with that are not familiar. Would it
Mm,
be a capitalist, a laissez-faire?
exactly. Exactly. That's the exact frame of mind or frame of reference I'm thinking about a capitalist.
Okay, so right away, people from the middle to the left, right down the center, all the way to the left will go, the hair will go stand up. Wait a second, capitalism?
Right.
Um, and when I think of capitalism, I think of free market. That's what
Correct.
okay. The free
Correct.
market system
Yes.
versus a socialist system
Correct.
or a communist
Correct.
to the extreme. And this is, I find this very interesting because I see the good on all sides. I mean, from a capitalist perspective, I worked for corporations my entire career. I worked for J.P. Morgan Chase and I worked for IBM.
Okay.
They employed a lot of people,
Right. True.
and I was able to retire at a relatively young age because they employed me. And during that time, I was all for free market and I was all for business because I wanted to stay employed. I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean,
and I felt like, if they got tax breaks and they were able to operate, within reason, they weren't polluting rivers and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was technology, but they
right.
still needed to be able to grow and they needed to invest in order for the company to thrive, which it has been for over 100 years, both companies.
Right. And I understand that. And I think you already know, but what I try to do is get to the deeper question beneath that, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people look at the outcomes of situations and say, well, I would be okay with that person if they did this or if they did that.
Mm-hmm.
But really, what's at the root of it is, as an individual, I get the right to choose, right? And now I'm not saying that I get the right to take your life or injure you or do anything of that nature. That's where we get to the rational and irrational perspective. But it's essentially, I'm not here to make decisions only that you approve of. I'm not going
Mm-hmm.
to limit my life to that realm.
Mm-hmm.
So just my ability to make decisions for myself,
Mm-hmm.
and with that, I will respect your ability to make decisions for yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
that is, I would call that a anti-authoritarian position, And so
That's
that's
interesting.
exactly what that is.
How is it different from a libertarian? Would you say like a libertarian too? Aren't they for
So a
less?
libertarian position, from my perspective, is so this has been written about in objectivist circles, but a libertarian position is a political position, and essentially what I'm saying also in this book is all political positions have an ethical slash psychological position at the root of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't just hop in the middle and take a political position
Mm-hmm.
without taking a perspective on, does man have a right to his own decisions and his own life, and his his life is his own end, or whatever. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's it's his own. He can do what he wants with it. Um, or do I have the position that, well, the collective, or does society, are they able to make decisions for the individual? And so those perspectives will color the way that you look at politics. So that's why I try to get to the root of it.
Gotcha. So I grew up in I'm trying to trace back to the roots of how this all came down and how we got to the point we are today. Now, in the book, which I'll put up for a second, America's
Thanks.
Ethical Archetypes, and that is on Amazon, folks. And if you're a Kindle Unlimited person, you can get that book in Kindle Unlimited. That's how I got it, to be honest. So anyway,
Yes.
getting back to something you said right in the get-go, in the very beginning, I highlighted all my stuff, I have my Kindle.
Okay.
The founding fathers, this is like, I think on page 3, yeah. The founding fathers established the United States on the core principles that emphasize the role and rights of the individual. Right there. That's what
Yes.
you're saying. The
Yes.
architects of America laid the cornerstone of what would become not merely a democracy, but a constitutional republic firmly rooted in those axioms.
True.
And so, what happened? Did we, and that, we'll get into psychology later, but what happened? How did we stray from that? Did we stray from that?
I mean, I would say yes. Simple answer, I would say yes. But what happened? I think that there are natural tendencies in individuals, or people in general. And like after this book, after I wrote it, because I wrote it a little bit ago, I've also been continuing my journey and learning. And so I've kind of like incorporated some developmental models when I'm talking about psychology in a sense.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that there's a developmental path that we've taken as humans that to me have these, I guess, collective elements, because this is in the book as well when I use the psychological angle.
Yeah.
And the collective elements are more, I mean, they come from a primitive place, essentially, with what is mentioned when I'm doing my reading of what I get from psychology. These are primitive, more primitive elements than the individualistic perspective, because the individualistic perspective is a fairly new perspective in the history of humans. It's not something that you could trace all the way back to all of human history. It's just maybe like the last maybe 500 years or so.
Right.
So
because we lived in groups.
We were basically collective minded and didn't necessarily identify ourselves as individuals apart from groups or castes or, status or jobs or anything like that.
And that goes to now we're heading into the psychological side, the archetypes, which Jung talked about, which you talk about a great deal in the book.
Correct.
He says that we have, now I'm going to be really careful with this. I'm paraphrasing off the grid here.
Okay.
I'm going to give my interpretation that he says we have these, I'm going to say, is it subconscious models that we tap into as humans?
Correct. I think so.
So.
Yeah.
So, and then he talks about introverts versus extroverts. I believe he's the one that coined those terms too.
Correct. I do believe that he was the one that came up with introversion and extroversion.
So an extrovert obviously is one that goes out toward people and engages outwardly, and an introvert is more of a thinking type that analyzes and stays within themselves.
So, just to be kind of put a little more clarity to it, when Jung talks about it, he doesn't talk about it necessarily in a social sphere or a social realm. He talks about it in the nature of like objects themselves, and people are just another type of object in a sense. And so more or less any object, a person that's extroverted kind of like lives through objects. They live through their relationships. They live through their car. I'm just putting different objects into the sentence, but more or less that's that type of person where an introvert lives through their subjective experience. So they have a car. They can have a friend or have a family. They don't necessarily unconsciously identify with those things and, just almost can't separate themselves from the thing. Whereas an introvert is kind of like standoffish from the thing and like and saying and holds on to their own identity or their own ego in a sense. So it's just not a people thing; it's a complete object thing across the board.
Wow. See, now I never thought of it that way. I mean, you do.
That's how he
that.
writes it.
Yeah. Jung, who is he was a protege of Freud.
Right, they worked together for a while.
One of the founders, Jung is one of the founders of psychoanalysis, just to give people
analytic psychology.
Analytic psychology, yes. So now, okay, so we hit Rand, we hit Jung a little bit, somewhat, and then we talked about capitalism a little bit. I know, and people out there, we'd have to talk for hours to cover all this in detail. So I'm trying to like skate along the surface, and then we'll go dip below it a bit. So I'm going to cut to. We touched on both of those individuals and their approaches in philosophy. Probably not enough, but enough because we have an hour show for now.
Right.
You're saying, I believe, that leadership needs to have a blend of those two approaches to life to be an effective leader, or to have an effective government. We need a blend of those two approaches: Rand's Objectivism, and then Jung's introversion, as you defined it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I guess to give a little bit more on the book. So what I tried to do with the book is look at Rand's philosophy through the lens of Jung's psychology. And essentially, I'm doing a psychoanalysis of the philosophy and as such, right?
Okay.
And what I'm doing is, while I'm doing that, is I am filtering down, because Jung has 8 different types. These are his personality types. And I'm filtering down and I'm getting to what's at the core of Rand's type. And because of the way that she describes the foundation of the country from a philosophical standpoint, which I do believe that she got a lot of it right. And so while I'm doing that filtering, I'm identifying, okay, what psychological type is an appropriate type for leadership in America? Because what's really important is that, and I think you probably alluded to this, it's very hard for people to grasp that individualistic perspective is a newer perspective in history. And that is at the root of, or the foundation of America as a country. And you need people to protect that, because we can easily slide back into older forms of government, which the founders clearly didn't approve of, in a sense.
And would you say a monarchy? I mean, obviously, this country, at one point there was a monarchy here. That's why we had the American Revolution. So that could be a danger. That's the extreme to having a dictator, a monarch, a fascist government.
Correct.
And of course, many people throw those terms around and go, "It's happening." He's a fascist. I've heard both, and I've heard both Biden and Trump called a fascist, by the way.
True. Yeah.
So, in their own ways, I suppose they both, with the executive orders and stuff, both of them wrote lots of executive orders. Let's put it that way, and trying to drive the country in a certain direction. What frustrates me is, though, okay, let's back up a second. How did it evolve to that? Let me say this. Is there an example of a leader in American history that fits the model type that you feel would be a good government official to work in government today? I don't know if that's a loaded question.
No, I mean, I guess I would have to kind of like point to the founding fathers, because I think that people don't have to work at understanding, and this is just my opinion. This is not necessarily in the book, but this is my opinion where I'm coming to, is that there was a necessity long ago that forced people to really be noble, to really read up, to really understand what they were investing in. Whereas though today you can be very casual with your opinions.
Yeah.
You can share them. You don't really have to have skin in the game. You can get in a leadership position and really not even have any understanding of the country at all, in a sense.
Uh-huh.
And so for me, I just think that because some of the older atrocities or disadvantages or wrongdoings was so new and fresh in people's minds, and probably wasn't television, not probably, it wasn't television, it wasn't internets and phones to grab and
Mm-hmm.
steal your attention. You had to be aware of what you were talking about, or what, the
Mm.
the philosophy was a conversation.
Yeah.
Rights was a conversation. It was something that you really could dig into and understand. So I think, and somebody else said this too, but we underestimate the wisdom of the people back then, as if they didn't know anything, when what they were planning out, they foresaw a lot of the things that are happening today. That is
Wow.
exactly why the system is set up the way it is today.
Yep. Very good. Very well put. I spoke to a philosophy, a rhetoric professor who said, way back when, hundreds of years ago, like what we're talking about, you had to be, to survive even, you had to command the ability to communicate. You had to study. You had to be able to execute rhetoric in an efficient way. And even back further, going thousands of years ago, if you didn't have that, you better be able to fight. Because either going
It's
to be,
true.
yeah, right? You're going to be,
Right.
you're going to end up in the forum, or you could be the guy on top that's going like thumbs up, thumbs down. So,
Yeah.
and I think what Rand may be getting at, and again, I'm just a superficial study of her,
Mm.
and the philosophy, is that we have become, I'm going to get bleeped if I say this, politically incorrect say, we become fat, dumb, and happy, or slappy. And I don't mean fat literally. I mean, I'm talking about complacent. There's a complacency, a laziness. And I don't mean that, I know people, not everybody has high IQs and everybody's got different skill sets and all that. So here I am disclaiming my face off. What I mean is that we've gotten kind of spoiled in that so much is at hand in this country, not for everybody, I know, because there's different classes, but
Right.
but maybe so. And I think you hit on that if I'm reading it right, because you talk about DEI.
It's
And
true.
yeah, and in an effort to right wrongs, as you were saying before, righting wrongs, and uh, so much attention has been given to balance us that we've imbalanced us.
And
Does that sound right?
it does, right? But that sounds like an effect to me,
Mm.
right? In the sense that, if I think something is imbalanced in your home, do I have the right to come in there to fix it for you?
Okay, here we go.
That to
Yes,
me is what I'm about.
I'm glad. I'm
Because if I
glad you got
start
back to
there,
that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because if I start there, like, even if something, people do also need the right to do dumb things with their life.
Yeah.
Like, how else would they learn? They can't learn if you're always jumping
Mm.
in to fix everything.
Yeah.
Now, the goal really, in my opinion, is to kind of persuade or show people the good things that you can bring when you help people. But help is not something that I owe to you, and it's not really help from my perspective. I want you to pursue your vision of happiness. I can't know what that is. All I can do is come in and present my vision of happiness and impose it on your life. And for someone, and there are people out here who don't possess a really strong sense of self that will allow you to do that and think that is a positive. But I think we know that is not a positive. Because there are some people that will live a life that other people have presented to them as if that's their own choice, but it's
Wow.
it's really not.
Wow. I mean, I've never heard it explained that way. I mean, when I say it, I'm talking about an alternate view, a different view of how I feel. Well, our country has made efforts. They call it wokeness or progressive, and those are new terms because it started a long time ago. And I'm not again. I'm not again. We're just discussing here, folks. So don't write and say a horrible human being. Whatever. Oh, you could say it if you want to, but I'm thinking about, because these arguments have come up recently. It's a hot button about the elimination of DEI at the federal level, and. I'm against any extremism. I'm against wipe all that out, and wipe all that out, because it's too much. I feel too much change too fast, and then the human nature side goes into fight or flight. Talk about archetypes and all that. People panic and go, "Oh, what's happening? Oh, they pulled all that away. They pulled all that away. Oh no!" And I feel that's what causes major disruption. I think a better approach is to do a gradual shift over. Unfortunately, well, fortunately, we still have elections every 4 years. So you'll have one team that comes in and takes away DEI. You'll have another team that comes in and puts in DEI and makes it. All right, and this isn't about DEI, by the way. This is about philosophy and approaches. But I want to talk about DEI because you did talk about it in the book. And I think it's an example people can relate to. And if I got it right, it has to do with if you keep, again, it's back to that assuming and thinking what a group or an individual needs, and you hand it to them, then they're never going to be able to become resilient, number one, and number two, they're not going to be able to decide ultimately what's best for them because the government's imposing it on them. I think I got that right. What do you think of what I just said? Because I'm not sure.
I think that's true, right? But once again, that's another effect, right? But I think that's important because I think people understand the effects, right? I would almost say what you were just describing about what I was saying, probably that is what I was saying. It sounded like a conservative perspective in a sense.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But to me that's true. But the reason that I would advocate for the one side, the perspective that I'm advocating for, is not necessarily just because that's true, but it's just because it's right. That's the thing. Think about, and I think we have to think about the opposite, right? What would be the opposite if that weren't the way? And what's happening right now? So DEI in a sense.
Yeah.
If we say we want DEI and we're imposing it at a federal level or any level of government, what we're saying is we'll have to tax people because the government doesn't make money. They have to get the money from people.
Yeah.
People who are presumably competent, and shift that money, take it from them because they don't have a choice because, that's the nature of government. They own legal force. And so once they sign it into law, you owe the bill.
Yeah.
And so once they take that money and it goes through all these channels, which people don't like to hear, but once that dollar that you put into the system comes out of the system, I'm assuming maybe you can get to 30 cents on the dollar, maybe 40 cents on the dollar after that.
Wow.
And then they put it where they supposedly want it to go. And the whole point of it is people should be free to make these choices themselves.
Yeah.
Instead of giving a person 40 cents on the dollar through the system because somebody else said so, this is something that people can join forces and handle together. And so when I'm making an argument about DEI, it's not necessarily don't help people or don't, lend hands or or pursue, all of those different, do those pursuits. What I'm saying is own it. Own it in your community with the people you know. Start with your family. Start with your community. Start with whatever. You go to church, your schools, whatever's around you. And then that way,
Yeah.
you own that decision. It's not someone forcing you to do something where
Yeah.
you can't connect it and make reality out of it. It's you taking, your personal experiences. And actually there's an emotional payoff because you see the effect, or you have conviction in your contribution to someone else's growth or help. Or whatever.
Excellent. Excellent. I love what you just said. And I've been scrolling around to find some of the things you said. You said about diversity. The beauty of America lies in how diversity and inclusion naturally emerge from competitive free markets. In a capitalist system, people choose to engage with members from diverse groups to achieve shared goals, benefiting all involved. Individuals form these relationships willingly, free from coercion. In contrast, forced relationships encourage engagement without reason. While forced diversity may increase interactions among individuals of diverse backgrounds, these interactions lack cohesiveness in the absence of shared values. Woo!
Right.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
I can't say it any clearer than that, to be honest with you.
Yes. I mean, this is, I'll have to say, I give you so much credit for saying this. And, again, everybody that's listening to Lens of Hopefulness with John Passadino and my guest, Damien Dubose, who wrote the book, America's Ethical Archetype, and which is on Amazon. And for those on YouTube, there it is again. Going back to us, getting back to the points of all this. It's not. See, this is what I like about what you're doing and saying, is this. It's not a radical, fist in the air or flag. It's like it's a carefully analyzed view, and it's an analysis of what.
That's what I try to present.
Yes, it's an analysis. Now, here's where I get cynical.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but
I like it.
you know what it is? Because I've been around a while. I'm in my 7th decade, everybody. So,
Oh, wow.
I'm on Social Security. Give me that government handout. So I'm saying I came in, I think Eisenhower was president. I was too young to remember that, but I do remember Kennedy vaguely. He was assassinated when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And then there was Johnson and Nixon. And I'm looking, I'm thinking of Gerald Ford. I'm thinking of the Bushes. I'm jumping all over the place. Clinton. I'm trying to figure where, again, the shift started. And you said you go back to the founding fathers, and it's been coming, it's been building all along because of probably
True.
technology, for one thing, the population growth. I mean, there's jokes. Sometimes the comedians joke, like, of course, Washington was a great president. There was like 500 people around, this is exaggeration, but so I'm kind of all over the place on this. But okay, so my cynicism is in this. It's gotten to the way it is today, 2026. We're in February 2026 for the recording purposes. And it's not just that evolution of technology and the population and all that's gone on before with forced programs, for example. It's not just all that, but it's, ironically, the capitalist system has resulted in a large swath of people that have big chunks of money that they're able to put into political action committees, that they're able to use to influence whoever is in the government. And that, I think, is a huge problem. And I don't know how that can be undone, no matter who you put in, whether it's an introvert, extrovert, or I mean, that's where how I see it. I feel like it's going to be very difficult. This is great analysis, but how do you shift it without, is that the first step? Do you eliminate the special interest, or you put a cap on campaign contributions first, or do you start at the education? And this is a big question. I'm kind of like 4 minutes. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And then simultaneously, do you start in the education system and with stricter curriculums and no more like everybody gets an A, like that? How do you happen to have a macro level recommendation that can shift us? Let's put it that way.
I think you gave the answer, right? It starts with education. And essentially in the last part of the book, I kind of quoted Rand, and this is what she talks about. It starts with education. And because essentially when people know better, they do better by osmosis in a sense, or just by nature. It's inherently. It's the problem that we really see is that we haven't formulated what's really happening or articulated it very accurately.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we were to do that and we were to show that, there are different perspectives of looking at life. If we look throughout history, there's been this ascension through these perspectives, which we can find as like a developmental path.
Yeah.
Until you hit level 7, you don't even know that level 7 exists. All you know is level 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Yes.
And so if you were to present a view of the world, and let's just say a level 9 perspective, only thing that I'm advocating for in this book is that leadership in America requires a level 9 if that's the max perspective.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that there aren't people out there who exist at level 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. A person at level 9 can appropriately approach the system and give space to those perspectives or to those approaches to life, respectfully, from an individualist perspective, from a rational perspective, from a rights perspective.
Yeah.
And a lot of people use the word rights, and really don't even understand that these are abstractions. This is an abstraction. Like you have to understand you have to understand rationality before you really understand what rights truly are. And so education is the root. You have to start there. And then I think for me, what I try to lay out in the book to make clear to some people, because I'm speaking to people at different levels, is that when you're talking to people, I probably can give an example after this, but just be honest. Be honest about what we're doing here. This is part of the reason why I wrote this book, because I'm thinking of myself as a child and the things that I wish that I would have heard growing up. And then what I come to understand through trying to learn and obtain knowledge is that people just weren't honest. Like, no, you are here. Your upbringing is to develop your decision making. That is what that's what your parents are supposed to be doing. That is the sole thing that they are doing, helping you develop your decision making. And when you get to an age where you can work and you can, be an asset for a company or start your own company or whatever, you are then generating an income to take care of your own self. And it all flows from there. But that perspective of life to build all education from that, no, this country or this social or this civilization or this nation is built around and for individuals. That's what it's built for. Not built for the collective, built for individuals, and understanding what that is. I think that just will kind of bring all of the proper questions to the surface, and then we can approach them how we need to approach anything else.
Great. Now, have you Obviously you've gotten great reviews. I've read some of the reviews for the book. Have you gotten any negative feedback from somebody who might jump to a conclusion about what you're saying? Have you had an alternate view? I mean, there's always crazies, not crazies, alternate views. I shouldn't say crazy. What I was talking about is a extremist view. I mean, I personally, I go on, and I'll let you answer the question in a second. I purposely go on certain newspapers that I know are very right wing, and I make comments, and then I watch all the insults come in. I boom, 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 boom. I'll just say one thing, and then I'll just go, "Oh, Biden, and Obama, and he's."
Right.
They hide their curse words. They change the format so they don't get hit by the screener, and they just get really. So I was just curious what the reaction is. I saw good reviews, but what are the reaction from people who may have misinterpreted what you're trying to do? Have you gotten any very negative feedback?
I mean, typically the negative feedback I get is because some people have a very emotional response to anything Ayn Rand,
Yes.
right? And that is typical, but it's also is typical of what I'm saying here is there is a bias, or not a bias. Let me not say a bias. There is a dislike for the individualist perspective.
Yes.
That is like, and I can't say this enough. It's so new and it's so unfamiliar to people. A lot of times they just think, no, you're just a selfish this. You're just someone who doesn't want to share or doesn't, whatever the words can be.
Yes.
The issue is that, and like I said, I'm incorporating other thinkers along with this, and Eric Fromm is one of those thinkers. And his thing is that capitalism is what changed the personality of man. Being able to free trade, change people, and help, and created the whole level of individualism in a sense. So that feedback I get, like, it's always direct. Well, it's usually rooted in a dislike for Ayn Rand or a dislike for anything capitalist.
Yes.
Which, like I said before, as an individualist, like, you have to kind of like just take it. Because you have to understand, people they don't really have a grasp of that perspective. They can't
Right.
really understand that view of life. They
Yeah.
can't. I know it sounds hard to understand or hard to believe, but they literally cannot understand that view of life.
Well, yes, they're not educated. I mean, both, and I'm going to just talk. We're in the U.S., so I find so many people are being ruled by emotion. Now, everybody says, "Oh, the media, the media, the media." Well, yeah, the media wants to get people engaged, and the more emotional the headlines, bombshell quote by the president, whatever it is, it's always bombshell, breaking news, and it draws people in. Hey, all our great entertainment, our dramas, I watched the film Sinners recently that got nominated for 16 Academy Awards, and wow, I mean, this thing really pulls you in. So yes, drama sells. So the media has definitely adapted that. And you know something? You and I can get 100,000 views if we started cursing at each other and shaking our fists. And I put that clip up. And I go, "What do you mean?
Probably.
Rand, wasn't she an atheist?" And then I start saying that, we're all, all going to be damned to hell, and I'm going to burn the book. Then we'll get the views.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
It's true. It's true.
true.
Sensationalism.
Sensationalism. Yeah. So we're at a point. Well, I know for a fact, and that there's a. I'm sorry, I'm going to use the D word, dumbing down. There's a dumbing down of America. It's not just. It's the technology, from driving and having everything done for you. You just push the button, park the car, to AI. which is a great tool, but it's doing so much for people. And it's also, I mean, interestingly enough, it's probably going to help companies make more profit because they're going to eliminate salaries. But it's also contributing to making it so easy to just get a blurb on something that may not even be totally correct. Mm-hmm. As opposed to somebody, I know you have an MBA and you have you're educated, obviously, and how did you arrive at these conclusions? You didn't just go to Wikipedia. I'm holding up highlights from the book, by the way, and I have my Kindle here, folks. But so give us an example of what you had to go through to write this very detailed book. I mean, when I say go through, I didn't mean I didn't want it to sound like torture. The work that you had to apply yourself to do to learn this stuff.
I mean, it was a labor of love in a sense. It was a thing. I was always into psychology and at some level.
Yeah.
Got into personality types, thought that was cool, just had fun with it. Got into philosophy in a sense, and then things that I didn't really pay attention to at all before, I started to understand them. And I'm pretty good with logic, so I work in finance. That's my day job, and I do logic all day. And so I just come to the conclusion, I'm like, well, wait a minute. These arguments, especially in my community that people throw around, it actually doesn't work. It doesn't work with the facts. It doesn't work with the nature of humans. Wait a minute. And so I'm just a person that's always trying to seek truth and understanding.
Yeah.
So when I just sat down and I kind of put two disciplines together, and I read Jung, and just something snapped for me. And so it just became this daily grind of, well, how does this work with that? And how does that fit with this? Well, what does it mean to be rational? Well, actually, if rational is at the conceptual level and irrational is at the perceptual level, we can't come up with the concept of rights without rationality. It's impossible. So, wow. And then you have Jung and his types and the way he separates them, like the rational types and rational types. And then you just start to see, oh, this perspective is the only perspective that you could use to even develop a concept of rights or a concept of justice. Abstractions from abstractions. And abstractions from abstractions is for some people it's just like, look, man, whatever. You know, I'm not into all that philosophy, this, that, and other, but it is at the root of this country. So for me, it's the doing the logic, understanding, trying to figure out where I'm wrong, trying to figure out where the consistency in the logic. What's A and B? How does that get to C and D and E and F? But then don't bore people to death. So it's a lot. It's trying not to bore people to death.
So you worked hard at it, and I think, and you wanted to do it. So we're putting these elements together that is kind of like you're painting a picture of the type that we need to be a leader. So when are you running?
You sound like my friends.
Yes. Because the opposite is that shoot from the hip, impulsive, go from the gut approach. And like the current president, he's just, I call him a bull in a china shop. And, some people like him because they, for various reasons, one of my older cousins said, who doesn't talk to me anymore, I have people on both sides that don't talk to me, but said, he's like when our dads used to get together at the kitchen table and talk politics. He's that type of guy. I thought, yeah, my father was a great guy. He really was a great guy. But he had a high school equivalency diploma. He wasn't a study. He was a blue-collar worker, Right. So, and your father was a plumber or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with being that. But they weren't at the level where they could really understand the intricacies of like what you're talking about, how the country was formed, all that. They were World War II people. They just saw, we got bombed, Pearl Harbor got bombed, Europe was being bombed. We had to go kick some butt and prevent the fascists from taking over, Mussolini, Hirohito, Hitler. And then after that, it was Stalin, the Cold War. So it's always like, we got to be tough and strong. And then
Right.
this guy comes along, because my cousins who are older, in my age range, they're like, this is the guy, because he's a tough guy, and we need to be tough and strong so we don't get taken over. But there's no
There's an element
depth
to that, though.
There's no depth to the argument.
Yeah.
And that's why everybody's so fresh. That's why I'm frustrated. That's why I read the book. I have to read it like twice more to really grasp it, obviously. By the way, it just slipped my mind. I happened to find an interview with Ayn Rand and Mike Wallace.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, he was challenging her on, and that was back in the 60s, I believe it was, maybe early 70s or something.
Probably 60s. Yeah.
But he was it's just another issue, is he was challenging her on what we were talking about before, about the individualism, and how it appears to be anti-Christian. Jesus the giver, inclusive, give bread and food to everybody and all that. And and she was like, well, the interpretation is, take the bread. You're hungry, go grab it. And it sounds like, take it from the poor guy and eat it because you need it more. And it's not that. That's what people
No.
I think, yes, and that's going to be a problem all the way through, I still say.
Yeah, I
with
mean,
this.
it will. I mean, to your point that you were just saying, though, to me,
Yeah.
toughness is needed. Like I am an advocate for toughness, but I am an advocate for an integrated personality, like thoughtfulness and toughness. Because if you're thoughtful, you would know that you need to be tough, because that's what those are the facts that the world presents to you.
Yeah.
And you need to understand when you need to be tough, how you need to be tough, when you need to be thoughtful, when those different things. So I'm never going to be on the side of any cowardice, anything like that. And I kind of write about that
Yeah.
in the book. And just with the whole like Trump thing, like for me, I am not. I dislike conversations about, oh, I love Trump, or oh, get Trump out of there. Like for me, I'm thinking no one that I speak to really has a vision for the future. So it's really just like the backup quarterback.
Yeah.
Put the backup quarterback in. And then once he does a bad job or whatever,
Yep.
what do you do then? So if you don't have a vision for the future, I don't really care about what you think, if you think it should be Trump or not Trump. We could get something worse if you have no vision for the future.
Right.
It could be worse than Trump.
Absolutely.
So we need to figure out what we're going to do going forward, how we're going to shape things going forward. And I think arguing about Trump either for or against is a cop-out. It's the ability to not think about the future for the instant gratification or the instant, whatever. Yeah, I did that, or we did that. Now what? Now there's no vision. So I'm not involved in those kind of conversations. People love to have those conversations.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they're that helpful going forward.
They're just it's another, back to the emotional stimulation. They're emotionally stimulating, and I think that's one of the reasons why people engage in them so much, is because they're getting a rush. It's like watching a TikTok video of fans fighting at the ball game. Oh wow, look at that! There's a game going on, but everybody's watching the fight because they just are getting off on that for some. And I can't get into the psychology of it, but it's just there. And that brings me to a point I was going to make, but I probably got off track, is the fickleness of our society. How, we saw it in the last, since 2016. He was in, I mean, this president, he was in, then he was out, and now he's back in again. So if he was so bad, how did he get back in again? It's because people are so fickle. They just see what's in front of them, and they want the opposite, because it goes back again to wanting like an instant gratification.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, oh, my taxes went up I'm just making this up. I'll just say, for a politician, hey, my taxes went up like by $500. I'm voting for the other guy.
Right.
It's not. It is. It has nothing to do with vision or strategy or anything. It's just like, oh man, this guy took a slice of bread off my table, so I have to go the other way.
And you could play into that.
Yeah.
And to me, there are a lot of people who are going to be in office because they play into that. And the leaders that I am trying to write to in this book are the leaders that won't play into that and will lead from a place, from a foundational principle perspective, but with the understanding that many people do look at things like that. So you do need to be effective. Just because you want to be principled doesn't mean that you don't want to be effective. You want both, but you have to have that. It's more of a strategic view than a tactical view, I guess I would say.
This book has to go to the young leaders coming up the ranks. It does. It has to get to them.
I would hope so.
I mean, I'm going to write to my congressman and my senator, and I'm going to send them. I'm going to say check out the podcast if they want to look at the podcast. But seriously, this is the first. It's been exhausting since 2016 because it's gotten worse and worse. I mean, it was never great along the way. I mean, people were complaining about Bush 2, and they were complaining about Obama. They were complaining. So, like you said, it's been a long time coming. But I really do think this type of thinking, if there are people who are capable of processing it, because again, I hate to sound cynical. I mean, because people at your level can, obviously, you put the book together, and there are reviewers that reviewed it, and a lot of that great Amazon reviews also, and Kirkus reviews, I believe, reviewed your book, and others will appreciate it, but there'll be others that just will say, "What's on Netflix tonight?" I'm sorry, I didn't mean to I'm not making fun, and I just feel so cynical. I apologize to you and to everybody else. There is hope. There is hope. My podcast is Lens of Hopefulness, and here I am saying
exactly
it's hopeless. It's hopeless. I'm gonna have to edit this out. I might edit this part out, Damien. I am so sorry.
No, gotta have hope, always.
Yes, I'm gonna leave that part in. Gotta have hope.
Okay.
I really want to say that, I've been listening to I listened to your book's on audio too. I saw it on Audible.
Yes.
I have to grab it on Audible because I actually listen to books better than I read them. And so
I'm the same too.
Listen to a book on the brain, your aging brain, because I'm getting into that age range. Of course, all these things that the book is saying, I should have been doing for the last 50 years. So it's like, okay, do I still have time? But anyway, the point is that one of the things it says to do is to engage in a conversation where you actually have to think, and it stimulates the brain. You've actually given me 5 more years of great memory because I was able to stimulate.
You're welcome.
But everybody, I have to tell you, this book makes you think. And this conversation has made me think, because I am like fishing around as I'm processing what Damien's saying. I'm like, are you saying? And I love getting this way. I'm a little embarrassed that I'm not as well versed as I could have been, because I'm lost in some places, but it's gotten me really to push the envelope. And I think people need to do that. Is if I could offer a lens of hopefulness to look through, it's put yourself in this position where you're stretching to learn and explore things other than, like you were saying earlier, we got to get rid of this guy, we got to get rid of that guy, and fickleness and back and forth. Let's think it through.
Exactly.
Let's think it through. And it's really, the philosophy applies to all walks of life, as you were saying earlier.
That's true.
Yeah.
All the good ones.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying, I mean, there are unhealthy ways of thinking too, where people are obsessed over things and they just go into a loop. And I'm not talking about people with OCD. I'm talking about, which is a mental illness. I'm talking about just overthinking, which is another whole issue in our country, amongst Western civilization. Overthinking and putting, well, we're not going to solve all this, so I'm going to stop right there. We don't want to get into a loop of overthinking and to the point where we don't get anywhere. We just spin our wheels. We want to get to the point where we're stretching, thinking, and hopefully that'll generate the momentum to push us back into a direction we perhaps should be in. That's how I'll say it. Ooh, that was hard.
That's what I would like to see.
Well, that was hard to get. Like I said, my brain's exercising. The muscles are like, ooh, ooh, ooh.
Nice. I like it.
Well, Damien, again, everybody out there, I will bring up the book one more time for the YouTubers. America's Ethical Archetype, Establishing the Psychology of Moral Authority and Correcting Our Country's Broken Politics. Stop screaming out there. It's okay. We're friendly. And Damien Terrence Dubose, and look at that. Look at this guy. This guy should be running for president right there. Oops. I'd be careful with that, because it's it's scary and volatile. It's become that, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You never know. But seriously, on the grassroots level, president is big. It's the toughest job in the world, really. But maybe perhaps could be the mayor of your local town. Something. Try there.
Yeah, it's a good start, So yeah, I do make arguments about executive versus legislative positions, and
See?
Who fits best for that. So
there you go. At the very least, I would love to see you become a political consultant. Do you need an agent? I'm here if you need an agent.
Hey, I'm all for it. We need it. That's what I would say. And that's what the book is. The book is there to be the seed to kind of like help thought grow for others, and in the right direction, to give them some kind of stability to understand, or to create roots so they can build their thinking around some principled approach to what we're doing here in this country. So that was the purpose of the book.
Beautiful. I love it. I really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you again for joining.
Me too.
This has been Lens of Hopefulness with John Passadino.
Streaming on all platforms.
Spread the word.